So, welcome to Wise Happenings, and let's give a warm round of applause to our speakers. Youssef.
Why do we have to go to a closed building to get education isolated from the community? Why do we have classes, with 25, 30 people sitting in individual or double tables, facing one teacher? Why do we have these rigid time structures where you have to take 1 hour English, 1 hour mathematics, 1 hour history, whatever? Why is education delivered in such a way? Why do we have classes of children from the same age? Didn't see that much in the past. Why? Is it scientifically, proven that it's more effective for learning to have children from the same age in classes? People have different rhythms of learning and different ways of learning. So why would we put students from the same age in the same class and process them this way year after year? So we're trying to move from a current system that we could call an industrial model of schooling into some kind of future system with the highest accessibility and quality possible to all. So we need some kind of transformation strategy to move toward these future systems. And of course, we will face, resistant forces that of course will push us probably back to the old system, since it's a very well established system for the past 200 years. So that's going to be our outline. Part one is uncovering some historical aspects of the current system. Part two, throwing some ideas of how a future system would look like. Part three, about the transformation strategy. How can we move effectively toward these future education systems? So just to give you a little bit of my background, for the past 10 years, I've been researching, designing, and delivering trainings in the field of leadership, and more specifically, in the field of ethical leadership. I had the opportunity to learn from different kinds of institutions. One of the latest was Oxford Leadership Academy, where I was associate director for the MENA region. I found an initiative 6 years ago called Ethical Leaders, which is active in training young leaders on ethical leadership and networking them. I got interested into understanding human behavior. So studied more cognitive, emotional, behavioral psychology, trying to understand what are the mind processes, especially that happen in the minds of leaders when they decide to act or not in an ethical manner. So developed a simplified mind model, having different aspects, cognitive, emotional, and so on. I had the opportunity to teach and train students from different ages, primary school, high school, university students, and also to train young leaders. And then I got interested into the modern history of public schooling. So this is one of the main professors, I would use his research. His name is Professor John Taylor Gatto. He was selected Teacher of the Year 3 times in a row in New York City. And he wrote a very famous book, a very research-based book, 400 pages on the history of public schooling, called An Underground History of American Education. So before going further with, a framework for redesigning education systems, I think we have to agree on, first of all, what are the main purposes of education? So according to John Taylor Gatto, the 3 main purposes of education are, first of all, to make good people. So people, with solid moral values, to make good citizens, and third, to help young people identify their talents and to nurture them, to nourish them with knowledge and know-how. Knowledge, skills, and character as well. So in knowledge, we try to help young people develop better understanding of how the world works through world history, sciences, arts, and so on. Skills, thinking about developing critical thinking skills, creative skills, develop talents, develop leadership skills as well, communityship, and character, which reflects upon our relationships with ourselves, with family, with the community, and if we add the spiritual dimension, relationship with God. So education throughout history has been delivered in many different ways. If we take the example of ancient Greece and Athens, we had both 2 forms of education, formal education and informal education. Formal education was mainly delivered in kind of public schools or through private tutors as well. In these private schools, there was the elementary part of it where children, mainly or essentially men, because this education was delivered to men, but unfortunately was not offered to women and slaves, not very known facts. So primary school, they were essentially learning how to read, write, count, draw. Secondary school, they would learn more natural sciences, rhetoric, methodology, like that. Sparta, of course, another city, has another kind of training, more focus or more military-oriented training from 7 to 12, and then an advanced one from 12 to 18. Education system these days. Medieval Europe. So we had medieval schools, essentially run by the church, generally for the priests and children of the aristocracy. In the Islamic civilization, 9th century, so we had some very pioneering education institutions, such as the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, Dar al-Hikmah. We had Al-Qarawiyyin University in Morocco, founded by a lady called Fatima al-Fihri, which is right now recognized as the oldest university in the world, still active according to the UNESCO and the Guinness World Record. So we had scholars holding learning circles in mosques or in madrasas. So madrasas, by the way, are not restricted to religious studies. They are also, we teach there different kinds of topics, but it was kind of scholar-centric. These learning circles, were open to anyone, so no difference in, gender or age or social status. So anyone interested in the topic could attend these learning circles. The madrasas, probably the oldest madrasa, the one which is considered the oldest madrasa was Dar al-Arqam at the time of Prophet Muhammad, where he used to teach his followers, so women, men, young and old, slaves and free men, about religious matters. But I would say the most important experience in schooling, which I was really interested in, is what happened for the past 200 years. So here we go. The most important actors, probably that we could identify in an education systems, are teachers, school principals, parents, teachers unions, teachers college that trains teachers, the state, employers, the community. In some countries you also have private education foundations like in the US that play an important role. In lobbying and positioning presidents of universities and boards of education and so on. So in short, the education system, probably designed in 200 years ago, was seen like this, as a design process. We have an input, we have children at a certain age that will go through a schooling process and then they graduate. So it was mainly designed, as we can see it today, as a system, pouring information into the heads of students, same age, classes, moving year after year, more and more information poured. Yes, there are some skills developed, but probably not much. Life skills that will benefit them in real life. And I think it's very important to understand a little bit where this system comes from. Because they say, okay, is it really important to know the history to be able to imagine the future? Yes. Because a lot of people can't imagine something different than this kind of schooling, public schooling that we have today. They still think, okay, classes, one teacher, okay, let's use some, electronic boards, let's use some games and so on. But they're still in the same setting, same kind of philosophy of industrial schooling. So I love this saying of Aristotle, which was very useful for me. If you'd understand anything, observe its beginnings and its development. And I would like to leave you with this very small video animation made by Learn Liberty Institute, presented by Dr. Davis, just to show where this system was born, the system that we know today.
The modern school was invented by the Prussians after 1806. Before then, education was delivered in many different ways. What we think of as the school was invented in that particular time and place. And it was invented for a very particular purpose. which was to produce loyal, obedient subjects and soldiers, and people who would also be productive and obedient workers. It's this that explains why school is the way it is and has the features that it has. It explains why it is that the school day is divided up into rigid, time-structured blocks. It explains why it is that the organisation of school is hierarchical and highly structured.
Apart from the indoctrination aspect of the schooling system, I mean, we can say they did their best. You know, they only knew the industrial, you know, we're in an industrial economy, so probably trying to deliver this kind of education of reading, writing, and counting to most of the people for free. So they designed the system to allow probably the maximum of people to attend this schooling, because they felt it was important to build, you know, a nation that knows how to read, write, and count. In 1806, you know, the Prussian army was defeated by the French army of Napoleon Bonaparte. So that created this, I mean, strong pressure to rebuild the education system of a nation. They would build it rather quickly. In 1815, you know, the Prussian army would beat the French and I think the English in Waterloo as well. But this system, this crucial system, actually triggered a kind of admiration from the big powers at the time. The English, the Americans, and so on. So what happened actually in Prussia didn't stay in Prussia. In 1840, we have a man called Horace Mann, who became the director of the first board of education in the state of Massachusetts, who was a big fan, big admirer of the Prussian system. So he made a trip to Prussia, came back, wrote a report, and lobbied for the state of Massachusetts to adopt this Prussian system of forced schooling. And he managed to lobby, and in 1852, the first law was passed in the state of Massachusetts to make education or schooling mandatory in the type of, very similar to the Prussian system. Later on, there was a major development between 1906 and 1920. You have two great education reformers like John Dewey and Edward Thorndike, who were supported by some very rich industrialists and financiers like Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller, or J.P. Morgan, who actually shared a certain ideology that for a nation to be great and thrive, most of the population, the masses, need to go through a kind of, you know, public schooling system that will prepare them to work in factories, in the army, in administrative offices, and so on. And just an elite, very small portion of people, should actually have a liberal education and prepare them to lead the nation. So that's why, in parallel to creating public schooling system, we have also the elite private boarding schools that appeared. They don't teach the same. According to John Taylor Gatto, who had the opportunity to teach in both public schools and elite private boarding schools, he said they don't deliver the same curriculum, nor the same teaching approaches. They're more focused on, you know, enabling the youth to develop a better understanding of human nature, to the study of history, psychology, sociology, to understand how human societies are built and evolved, to understand also the different institutions and how to leverage them to influence the populations based on responsibility, independent work, good manners, and physical education as well to develop grace and strength. So here we go, arrive to imagining a future system. So quickly, if you want to design a future system, probably we should consider some kind of holistic development. You know, developing young people with their cognitive dimension, emotional dimension, physical, social, spiritual. One example of a pioneering country who was ranked #1 in quality of primary education by the Global Competitiveness Reports of 2014-2015 of the World Economic Forum, you find that the Finnish system, first of all, they try to envision, you know, what kind of citizen would you like to produce? What kind of understanding of the world, what kind of skills would you want to produce? So it starts from there, starting with the end in mind. What kind of citizen we want to produce for the 21st century? Then you have a curriculum that was built, not as overloaded as the curriculums that we know, with a core component called play. You know, learning has to be fun. And the third one, very important cornerstone, is the quality of teachers. So teachers receive a very high quality of training. The selection process is it's very tough. You have interviews, they have a master's degree, and so on. And they trust them and they give them some freedom, you know, to how to deliver the curriculum. There is another much more, I would say, innovative model than the Finnish system, which is called the Sudbury Valley School System. Now available it has been created 30 years ago, now available in the United States, Canada, Denmark, Japan, Netherlands, Belgium, and Germany. In short, freedom for students to attend whatever. They create learning spaces in open schools, and they let students choose every day what kind of classes they want to attend. They're not forced into anything. Would think that, oh, they will go playing and they will not. No, they play and they also come to learn, depending on their interests and their talents as well. It was very successful, particularly for teenagers. Teenagers really hate, that someone imposed on them something. They are in this natural rebellion phase, and this system has proved very, very successful for teenagers as well, and specifically those identified as difficult teenagers or teenagers with problems in the public schooling system. They come, they enjoy this freedom, they see that the system respects their freedom to choose whatever they're interested in studying. If you want to build a 21st century curriculum, should have these building blocks. Should be individualized to recognize, the specific talents of people, the different learning rhythms. Should be accessible to everybody and affordable. Should be adaptable so that we can change it quickly. We don't have to wait like 20 years or more to change it to the realities of the societies. Should have play as a core component, and also freedom for people to learn at their own pace, whatever they want, whenever they want. So this is what I'm proposing here, is to have some kind of curriculums that bring together both online content through videos, animations that explain concepts and so on, games and simulations, assessments. And of course, the offline is also important, so that could support the offline. So people gathering in learning spaces, having some tutors or teachers, holding conversations, developing critical thinking, managing projects together, so learning through project-based learning, and coaching young people. And why not have, this idea of student portfolio instead of relying on grades and rankings, for assessments where people just have to regurgitate whatever the informations that were poured in their heads. So you have a portfolio that describes what the student has done in terms of projects and so on. Open campuses. Why do we have to close these campuses and isolate them from the community? So there is an example of learning neighborhoods, I think, in Brazil. So there are some experiences like that. Students have to mingle with adults. Why would they have to stay in childish environments? Why don't they go and go do some shadowing with adults, learn with adults, have discussions with adults? This is a very important way of developing the intellect of young people and their sense of responsibility. So lastly, the transformation, some ideas about how to transform the system. So there is something very important called lag time. There is some frustration among educators that we have been speaking about innovation in education for the past 30 years. Great ones, project-based learning, games, videos, whatever. And why is it takes so long to be implemented, adopted by states? So we have something called lag time that Robert Kiyosaki mentions in his book, Why A Students Work for C Students. The time delay between a new idea being proposed and its adoption. So let me give you a few order of measures. So in agrarian age, we counted this lag time in hundreds of years. In the industrial age, it was kind of 50 years increments. In the information age, we counted by half years. Now, the auto industry has an average of 25 years, the government industry 35 years, the construction industry, which is the longest, 60 years. So guess how big is the lag time in the education industry? 50 years. It's very long. Between an idea is proposed and adopted by a system. We have to ask ourselves, do we still think that curriculums and standardized testing should be centralized and decided by the state only? Should the state only set broad regulations, make sure education is offered for free to all citizens, and allow different kinds of curriculums to flourish? So building a curriculum, we have to start again with the end in mind. So if you want to develop skills like leadership, this is my field, so you have to develop activities where you have challenges, where you give children responsibility to lead projects in teams. You have to push them out of their comfort zone, to provide them self-assessment, to know their strengths and weaknesses, to give them support and coaching as well. These are the kind of activities that we need to find in curriculums. Why not bring the most forward-thinking, people in education and have them, supervise building a new kind of online curriculum with a crowd design, approach, allowing educators from different parts of the world to propose activities, and then we build curriculums on that. And this curriculum, let's try to find for it some credibility and recognition among big organizations and so on. So we don't really need the state to approve this kind of stuff. We can develop graphic design animation curriculums as well. Graphic design has become so important everywhere. It's not only about designing logos or websites or brochures. Now knowledge, text-based knowledge, has to be designed and presented in a beautiful way to be consumed, especially by the younger generations. So this is why we see much more developing infographics and animations, and even as interfaces for mobiles, for all kinds of devices. This is something I do care about, is to develop a human development curriculum. Something that will allow or develop people who will work to develop people and communities, like people who will work in talent management or anything related to human development, where you can have psychology with the history of human society, sociology, social entrepreneurship, where you offer also young people opportunities to develop social initiatives and social businesses in this sense. We start with current systems and their history, some ideas about future systems, some ideas about transformation strategy. Thank you very much.